So I've been playing a lot of Monster Hunter Wilds, and I know what you're thinking. How? Well, badly. I'm keeping count. It's been 27 crashes in 41 hours. Not great on that front. But nonetheless, I have been playing I Am Hunter rank 76, and this is not a traditional review. I don't think I can really dive deep and really comment on every single thing that's going on in this game until I've got a very good grasp of all of the weapons at endgame with full loadouts and stuff like that. But I can definitely give a lot of opinions so far, and the short version of it is, I think that this game is really, really good. It's excellent. It might be my favorite Monster Hunter, just not yet. It's got some problems, and I'm not even talking about the absolutely abysmal performance so far. So there is a lot of stuff to talk about. This is going to be a bit of a different video for the channel because there's so much to talk about and a really busy period right now with videos. So I've got a list of stuff to cover, and it's going to be a little bit more unedited, a little bit more unscripted, which I hope is going to be entertaining regardless. As a person who loves Monster Hunter, who's made quite a lot of videos on it, I have a lot of thoughts. I think we've never had a world this big at launch, just the number of locales and the love and care put into the actual environments, and so few monsters. That's going to be a problem, but at the same time, the gameplay fundamentals that are here are excellent when the game can be played. So anyways, hi, I'm Mug, and if you're new here, welcome. And if you're not new here, welcome back. Now, I don't know what you're doing with that outfit. I know I could not pull that off, but you definitely do. So keep it up. We're talking Monster Hunter Wilds today. Let's get into it. So look, the first thing to cover here that I have on my list is performance. I don't think that's gonna surprise anybody. Now, let me just say that these things change over time, and there is a chance that not long after this video is up, hopefully, something is done to resolve some of these issues. Maybe yes, maybe no, who knows. The point I'm making here is that if this applies, that's cool, and if not, you can use the timestamps to skip past this, and I've made it so that after we're done with talking about performance, there's no more real talk about it at all, okay? Maybe you're also just tired of hearing people talk about performance, and that's fine, but timestamps below. I think that the performance of the game is basically unacceptable, and there is a lot of interesting conversations to have around it, because I've seen a lot of people say, what did you expect? How is the game going to run on your potato PC? So here's a way of looking at both sides of this argument. I think that it is good that at some point we have to push forward. We have the hardware, and we've kind of grown sick and tired. We always seem to be complaining that every new game comes out on PS4 and PS5, and they're not taking advantage of the PS5 and stuff like that. And then when a game does, we complain. Well, actually, yes, because Monster Hunter Wilds does not actually just take advantage of it. The real problems are that it's unoptimized to hell and back on PC. It has constant crashes, a myriad of bugs depending on your hardware configuration. Doesn't matter if you're on the low end, on the high end. I'm on the high end and I can still play the game in some capacity. So that's better than most people, but I don't think I should be playing the game in the circumstances I am, rocking a 13th Gen i9 and a 4090. I am 100% in on games pushing stuff forward technologically, and to be fair, I respect the vision of Monster Hunter Wilds because it's not demanding more power just to look graphically better, which is another point. I've seen a lot of people complain about the graphics. Lots of people saying that it looks worse than World. I don't think that's true, but that's not the point. However, I do think that the game just looks amazing from an art design perspective. More on that later, but this is a game that tries to use that tech to do something better gameplay-wise. Seamless open world in a sense, just the ability to have... I've had hunts with 4 monsters in an arena with 4 hunters going crazy, and at any point you could leave that area and go fight something else and the game would have to continue working. It's just that what it's looking for and what it's asking of the consumer in response is just bad. It is just an unoptimized game. There really is no way around it. You can take a look at the Digital Foundry report on it. I'll leave that linked in the description below. It is crazy to me that one of the measures I found to avoid crashes is to turn off frame generation, and with my setup, running the game at 1440p in ultra wide, so 3440 by 1440, the game struggles with DLSS on, but with frame gen off, to hit a stable 60 frames per second. I can only hit that stable if I put on frame gen. To hit it stable without frame gen, I need to bump down quite a lot of different things so that the game doesn't go crazy in the middle of a fight and just stutter and the frame rate goes down, and then I get hit by a monster and it feels like it wasn't my fault because the game just kind of glitched in a sense, right? That's how disruptive some of that performance can be. And there's a lot of stuff up in the air if this is about the RE engine, if this is about Capcom not knowing what they're doing with certain tech they're trying to implement with the RE engine, because we had a lot of these problems as well with Dragon's Dogma 2. But having such a good game and such a massive success release and then not work well for so many people is not just really bad overall, and possibly will never have a decent fix considering Dragon's Dogma 2. I hope that's not the case here, given the size of Monster Hunter versus Dragon's Dogma, which, not to say Dragon's Dogma 2 was a small launch, but definitely not the same size as this. This is a monster release. Look at the sales. But what's even worse is that maybe they're never going to do anything, and they're going to learn the wrong lesson of not having to optimize or not having to do anything, considering that the game is a massive success regardless. I think it's bad. It's overall bad. And look, I am a huge Monster Hunter fan. I'm not afraid to say that I'm a huge Capcom fan, because as a critic, I'm always gonna call out when something I think is good or when something is bad. It doesn't matter how much love or how much attachment I have to a certain brand, to a certain studio, or to a certain franchise. So despite my love for Capcom, I'm starting to fear that some of the things they're doing are really looking bad. And that makes me very afraid, because they're also a company that I think has been making very good decisions. Pushing for Onimusha to come back, pushing for Okami to come back, kind of being one of the first companies to try and abandon live services and just say, we're going to go back to making like just good games from the ones you know. So I don't want them to have optimization or engine troubles be their pitfall, but it seems to be the case. Now, the stupidest part about talking about performance is that there is a chance that in a month all of this is forgotten, which is why there are timestamps below. So if you are watching this in the future when none of this is an issue, hopefully you skipped forward to here where there will be no more talk about this. Just overall, it's bad. I don't like it. I don't think anybody should like it. And we should expect more because we deserve more for our money. It's really that simple. And for as much as I love Monster Hunter, and for as much as I specifically love Monster Hunter Wilds, I do not recommend you buy this game right now, because the easiest solution to its problems, the performance and the ones I'm going to talk about in a moment, are to wait. There's a good chance you can get this game for cheaper later on, that the performance issues will be solved, and that it'll have a ton more content as well. So it honestly pains me, because I love Monster Hunter and I would love for people to experience a game like this at launch, when the fever is there, when everybody's there, when you can get into as many hunts as you want at the drop of a hat and jump in and just have a great time and discover some of the stuff in the game together. But it's just not the case. I would never recommend that somebody gamble with their money, and hey, you could try it out with the Steam refund policy and all that, but there's a good chance you buy the game and you just can't run it to a level that's satisfactory, and that sucks. All right, so now let's talk about the game itself. I think it's really good. I really, really like a lot of the overall vision that Capcom seems to have for the Monster Hunter franchise here. They've introduced a lot of systems within their streamlining that we knew from the beta that are very clearly here to create a very different experience at Endgame and make the game feel more like a lobby where you have fun, be that single player or multiplayer, and a lot of that seems to be in service of the overall experience. A lot of Endgame here is looking at the different areas and choosing hunts. There's a much bigger focus on multi-monster hunts, which is something that I think was really popular during Rise as well, Rise and Sunbreak, and it's a great direction in my opinion. But it's the locales, it's the changes that they have depending on the season that they're in and the time of day. It's just how impressive some of these areas can be as they shift and change. There's really some jaw-dropping vistas that have nothing to do with graphical prowess. It's all art, basically. I've seen complaints about the game looking washed out or not having a clear picture. I don't know if I'm lucky or it's because I play in HDR or what's going on, but I don't have any of those issues. Didn't have them in the beta, don't have them in the game. I think it looks amazing, top to bottom. Again, it's a graphics thing. Yeah, there's ugly textures here and there, but that doesn't affect what I'm looking for here, which is like the jaw-dropping spectacle and the vistas and stuff like that. It really is more about the art. It's just a beautiful world. It's huge, it's diverse. As you're going through the game, it just doesn't stop. There's so many places to explore and they all feel very fleshed out and cool and has all of that stuff that people wanted from World, of the ecology and the world building around it. But this time around, it feels like that ecology stuff was given to us along with the priority, which was excellent gameplay. This was my complaint with World, and I didn't have a YouTube channel back then, but I've said it before, but I think that when you're coming from 4 Ultimate, but more importantly from Generations Ultimate, World gameplay-wise felt like a big step backwards. It feels like we sacrificed so much of where the series was headed gameplay-wise in exchange for that graphical jump and that new focus on immersion for it all. And that was a very clear decision that they made, and it obviously paid off because World was huge and it was a huge success. But then Rise Sunbreak comes out, and yes, I'm aware, I see the comments every day. I literally get comments every day of somebody saying the reason Rise is bad is because it's a Switch game and the Switch is a baby console for babies, and that's why Rise is bad. So let me just repeat this as many times as necessary. Rise and Sunbreak are amazing games, especially from a gameplay design perspective, and are up there with Generations Ultimate as some of the most fun you can have actually playing with the Monster Hunter weapons. And small tiny recommendation for those of you, maybe you put in 80, 90 hours into Wild. You're like, I'm kind of done with this. I'm going to wait for updates. Go play Rise Break. You're going to have a great time. And you're not really going to notice much of a difference. You're just going to notice that there's more to the weapons in Rise Break. But honestly, all of the most important changes that they made to weapons in Rise Break are here. Surprisingly, some of the bigger changes from Sunbreak are in Wilds now, especially when you look at something like Insect Glaive, which I'm very glad they kind of maintained a lot of what they added to it, because that's a weapon that I could not have gone back to like the World version of it. Even Dual Blades, it's kind of like they chose a canon version of the switch skills from Rise Break. So instead of the aerial dual blades build from Rise Break, we got the demon build from Rise Break with the dodges that do damage, but with new mechanics added on top. But I feel like that's kind of the general design philosophy of the weapons in Wilds, is they chose a canon version from Rise Break. And it's great that we didn't abandon it all. I still would prefer to have the diversity of choosing weapons, but because they have at least kept some of the most important stuff from that game, I never feel bad about playing a weapon here. Quite the contrary. I'm really happy with all of them. And like across the board, I think most of the decisions are great. I haven't really found my flow with Switch Axe, which has been like my main for a very long time at this point, but I'm having a blast with what I'm playing anyways. And for me, the most important part is that Wilds feels much closer to Generations and to Rise because all of the weapons feel immediately fun. And that might sound like a controversial statement, so let me explain. In Generations Ultimate, there's so much wacky stuff that you can do with every weapon that at some point there is a version of a weapon that will appeal to you, and you'll want to explore it, check it out, and see what it's capable of. In Rise Break, with the switch skills, there is probably a version of every weapon that is going to be appealing to you, so you want to check them out and start playing them. And this is really important because wanting to play a weapon means you have brand new excuses to hunt a ton of monsters and create new weapons and get new decorations and build a loadout for that weapon. In World and Iceborne, I'm speaking from personal experience, of course, I never felt like I really wanted to play some of the weapons. In World and Iceborne, I felt much more like I felt playing 4, which was, I know these are the weapons I like. I'm willing to try these out, but really I don't like them. And often if I did try them out, I just didn't like them too much. Where in Generations Ultimate and in Rise, I would try a weapon and I would find excuses to use it because it was just that fun. I think Wilds falls into that bucket. They have struck what I consider to be a fantastic balance between the craziness of Generations and Rise and the more grounded, ecology-focused approach of World, while having that gameplay be king over the sacrifices I felt we made in World, and it is just great to have that. I'm having such a good time just playing the game, right? Pressing buttons in the game. You press the buttons, cool stuff happens. That's at the core of the series, and that is very present here. Now, a couple of other details about the game before we jump into the bigger problems and the bigger positives of it. The story, the progression, and the difficulty. So, I really like the story, but I completely understand why some people will not. There is a lot of this 2006 Gears of War walking and talking, like forced sequences throughout the game that can drag, especially if you don't care about the characters. But I think that they did a really good job this time around of characterizing all of the characters. It's really nice to have Gemma spiritually back from 4 as well. But in general, I really liked a lot of what's going on. There was a certain, I don't want to get too into the weeds, but you know, we're lost at this point anyways. There was a vibe to the interactions with Alma, the handler, that I really liked. I really liked the whole, due to the circumstances, the guild authorizes the hunt of this, that it kind of felt like I was in a, I don't know why it reminded me of a mech game. I don't know what in my brain is calling that back to me, but the whole like mission authorized type thing feels like very robotic, but it was cool. There's a couple of moments in the story that I thought were awesome. I love that our hunter speaks now. So much better than before. But overall, I liked the story. I liked some of the twists in it. I was genuinely surprised by some of them, and I loved discovering the new environments in line with the story progression. I thought it was well done, and it didn't really overstay its welcome. It took me maybe 14, 15 hours to get through low rank, and then just start on the high rank grind and progression there, but I enjoyed pretty much every minute of it. I thought it was good. Does it drag on at some points? Yeah, a bit. But I think especially a lot of veterans might like just be itching to get on with it, but I really enjoyed it. More important though, difficulty. So I was expecting the game to be kind of a cakewalk, mostly because I saw most reviewers say that it was a cakewalk, and I don't know if the version they played is different to my version of the game, or maybe I'm bad, but I really don't think I am. I normally consider myself pretty good at video games, and I have been playing Monster Hunter for a very long time, and I would not classify the game as easy, especially once you reach high rank. Of course, low rank is like tutorial stuff. It's pretty damn easy. And I did do low rank basically under geared. I don't even remember at what point I took off the first armor you get. But high rank, there were a couple of moments that very clearly the game was like, oh, you better gear up. If you don't gear up, you're just gonna get one shot. And at certain points in high rank, like talking the final quests available, if you gear up, you still get one shot. And you're like, oh damn, better go get my armor charm, I guess. Like, these monsters are pretty fast and pretty aggressive, and the overall feeling of some of the chase down and the aggression and the level of damage that a lot of these monsters can do feels way closer to Endgame Rise, and especially like DLC Rise and Sunbreak, than it does anything in Worlds, in my opinion. I have played Endgame Iceborne not long ago on a fresh save, and I did not have like an issue ever basically. I could make as many mistakes as I wanted, and then I would just stand up and heal and just keep doing that forever. And my Palico would save me most of the time, if not. Like, it's fine. Wilds, I have not had that experience, and we're talking about the day one release that makes me feel much better about the overall difficulty of the game, and I'm really looking forward to it. Like, have I been absolutely destroyed? Like smashing my head in like I'm fighting Violet Mizutsune for the first time? No. It's not that level of difficulty. But comparatively to where other games in the series have been on day one, I feel like Wilds is way more willing to put difficulty up front faster than the prior games in the series. And I'm judging this as a veteran from Try, and that has played through Freedom Unite, so it's not like, oh, my first game was World, and of course now that I'm experienced, no, I'm judging all these games on equal footing. Now, that is my take. Stuff may vary. Your upgrade path, your armor path, and especially your weapon choice can definitely have a big impact on all of this stuff. But this is how I felt it. I don't think that calling this game easy is fair. Sure, low rank, but especially once you're up there in high rank, you can get pretty smacked around, honestly. Now, some other positives that I don't know how the community is going to receive them, but I'm pretty favorable on is the focus system, like the whole aiming stuff, I think really smooths out the experience of a lot of weapons. Some people will say that it trivializes some of the difficulty of some of the weapons, but overall, I just like it more. It's just very comfortable and allows for hunts, and I think that we can escalate difficulty in other ways that aren't making some weapons more cumbersome than they need to be, and focus mode really helps a lot with that. It really transforms some weapons to be better, and it's well implemented in other weapons. I think that, for example, with Kinsex, it's really interesting how they implemented focus mode. A different story, though, are wounds. There is a lot of focus on wounds, and it being the main thing with the game. There's skills and a series of different stuff that is all centered on using wounds, and I think they're cool. They're really just reskinned Silkbind attacks that, instead of depending on a cooldown of your individual character, are now a resource that you spend on the monster. And there's some cool design of, do you want to keep exploiting this wound for extra damage, especially later on when you have weakness exploit, or do you want to pop the wound for the big burst? But that really becomes a question of what weapon you're using more than anything else, and it kind of muddies the water in multiplayer hunts. We'll see how it ends up, but for me, if I'm hunting with certain weapons like Charge Blade or Longsword or the Kinsect Glaive, I will leave all of the wounds to them, because most of my weapons only use them to do some damage. And for them, they give them unique buffs or special quality of life things, or just increases the sword gauge, all that sort of stuff. And that's kind of weird, because in solo hunts, everybody's on equal footing, right? That's fine and dandy. But when it comes to multiplayer, there are weapons that clearly benefit way more from using wounds than others, and that makes certain weapons feel like they don't have access to wounds, or that it's a waste. And at that point, I just feel like my weapon is kind of lesser, because I don't get the chance to do my cool wound moves. I don't have access to stuff that before in Rise, for example, were just stuff that I could do whenever I wanted. I didn't impact the other people on the hunt. And here, I have to just sit back and let other people take advantage of it because they can do a better job with them. And for what is a universal mechanic, I feel it's a bit lopsided there. Like, there's very clear pros to some weapons and none for others. But it's a fine mechanic. I think that it's well designed in the sense of giving choice, and you have to make that decision in the middle of the hunt on what you want to do with the wounds. And it's fun, which is very important. Like, balance aside, or the multiplayer dynamics aside, it's just fun to see bigger numbers and to do big flashy attack and big satisfying reward for doing so. And it recontextualizes the Silkbind attacks into something that probably more people are going to find palatable. Those are my feelings on that. Focus really good. The wounds, interesting. At least so far, we'll see where they go in the future. So all of that is great. The world is great. The weapons are great. I think the difficulty is pretty great. And we have a ton of reasons to farm endgame and go for different builds. We have an endless grind put in front of us with the RNG of RT and weapons at the very end of the game. So a lot of stuff here has been addressed, not to mention that the game has shipped with frenzy monsters, with tempered monsters, with like variations of stuff. And that's all great. And this is where we reach, in my opinion, the biggest problem besides the performance, which is the amount of content in the game. Now, to be fair, I would much rather have the base of the game be this solid, to have all of these locales, to have all of these systems here, and be lacking in monsters, than I would be if the combat were bad, or felt like a step back, or if I felt the environments were garbage or something. Like, within the potential ways that this shakes out, I'm happy with how this has shaken out. But it doesn't stop the problem from existing, and normally I wouldn't say that the amount of monsters is a problem. I've been warning that this would be the case for like 10 months. I made a video 10 months ago saying, I'm pretty sure it's going to have less monsters in World, and you guys need to be aware of that. Get ready, because a lot of people are going to be complaining because they just don't know how Monster Hunter works, especially a lot of people that jumped into late World after a bunch of updates, or Iceborne. This is a base Monster Hunter game, and we've seen that they have relied more and more on releasing monsters after launch. But not only is the amount of monsters pretty low, and some of the inclusions pretty questionable, some of the others great. A lot of what is here, like the quality is stellar, and I think we have a pretty healthy variety of monsters. Unfortunately, towards the end, it falls into the typical wyverns and dragon likes, but you know. The problem isn't that. The problem is that they have created a game that very directly would benefit from the same type of endgame systems that were in place in Sunbreak, but they didn't put them there. Like, to simplify the situation, Sunbreak had an endgame system that rewarded you for hunting pretty much everything, but it didn't really have a way of just letting you go hunt as much as you wanted with the same flexibility and comfort that we do because of the systems Wilds has put forward. Just so much of the streamlining that is here, so much of the overall feel of a lot of what's going on. Just being out there, whether it's online or by yourself, and just having your stock of meals ready and cooking when you need to, and just kind of, you know, chaining hunts together, just checking the map to see what's around the environment and starting up hunts all the time, and having a lot of what you're hunting, instead of relying on like repeating a quest over and over again, have it be more geared towards jumping online into other people's investigations, or being at the mercy of what the environment provides, what hunts are available. That is, in theory, super cool and super enjoyable. But that's where two problems show up. So having this sort of system where you just hunt whatever appears, right? Whatever's on the menu, receives so much more benefit by having more monsters than even before. Before, every monster is a huge deal. Their armor set, their weapon set, sometimes they come with new skills, new decorations, they can shake everything up, and it's always exciting, and you're gonna get a ton of hours of just that one fight because you have to master it in many cases, or because you're gonna farm it over and over again. But when you put in this more randomized system that's there to kind of create an overall feeling of you could be hunting for 2 hours and not hunt the same monster at all in those 2 hours because of how luck falls, every monster just expands the possibility of that randomization so much more. And with a system that's primed for that, we have the least launch monsters we've had since Try. And that kind of sucks. It feels like it's at odds with itself. And you might say, but the system is still good, but they also, in my opinion, kind of screwed up there, because for Artian weapons, you really want to be hunting stuff that drops rarity 8 Artian materials. And even for just basic weapon crafting, you're looking for Hunter Symbol 3. So I believe you need quest level 7 and above to get that, which is really just 2 monsters, basically. That's it. Like, that's really the only stuff you're looking to hunt. And that sucks, because if you want to gamble in the endgame grind, you want the stuff that's dropped by them, so you feel kind of forced to do those hunts and pretty much not anything else. When they had a golden opportunity to kind of find a way to scale so many of the other monsters to create just this kind of free-flowing, constantly adapting, let's just hunt whatever we get as a double hunt in front of us, and we will get materials for what we want. But that is not the case. Those things are still directly locked behind the biggest challenges in the game, which on one hand, fair, on the other, eventually boring. So it's the combination of those things together that makes me look at the endgame and say, well, we have a lot of reasons to hunt monsters, but not all of them. And we don't really have reasons to enjoy and explore all of the map beyond the sake of enjoying it and exploring it. And hey, that's great. Intrinsic rewards are great, but I just think that they're a bit better when they're tied into extrinsic rewards as well, and I think those are lacking here a bit. Now, it's not the worst thing in the world. If you want to try out new weapons, if you want to use certain weapons, you can go and farm those monsters. There's always going to be a certain utility to just going on pretty much any hunt. You'll find something of use from the rewards of almost anything, especially the process of filling out all of your decorations in endgame will require you to hunt all sorts of monsters. But if you're the type of player that just has one weapon, one perfect build, and then you want to start farming the true RNG endgame, you are going to be constrained to basically 2 hunts, and that's it. And I think they could have done better on that front. This is not my case, by the way. I do enjoy hunting pretty much everything, but I just feel like this is a problem that we've had forever with Monster Hunter, of reaching endgame and then the pool of monsters that you ideally want to hunt shrinking so much. And it was basically solved in Sunbreak, and a system like that could have helped so much in smoothing out a lot of this process of the endgame. And the fact that they didn't is kind of weird. So that I'm kind of disappointed by. And look, I could go on for a pretty long while about, you know, the existence of certain monsters in this game and just the monster library that Capcom has access to. And how I don't think that there's enough monsters, and I'm not particularly happy with the selection. And it kind of feels like they're saving a lot of the bigger heavy hitters and fan favorites for later. And I get it, you know, you want the game to have a long life cycle and eventually lead into an expansion and all of that, but in the end, to me, it just feels like the base game is a bit undercooked in a very different way than previous games. Like, Rise was just unfinished straight up, and World felt like a step back gameplay-wise. This one just feels like it's lacking monsters. That is the best of the options here. But I really think like this game needed 10 more monsters, and I can give you a very specific list of which those are to really be good. Because there are some very clear like omissions so far, and I'm glad they took a different direction, whatever you want, but it still feels weird. But it also doesn't feel like they went in the other direction of like, let's just get deep cuts in this. Like, they didn't take out Rathalos. Overall, though, it just feels like there's not enough to satisfy the systems that they put in the game. And that's what pushes me towards the game feeling rushed a little bit, like they had to meet a certain deadline, versus saying that they're holding it back for DLC or for like the updates, because it's very clear, like especially as you go through the game, there's a lot of areas. There's a lot of zones in this game. The maps are huge. And it's just kind of surprising to have these huge maps and then not monsters that you clearly would expect to be in certain parts of these maps not be there. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see where it goes, but I don't think we've ever had a more solid foundation for a Monster Hunter game that gets me just this excited, and it's just so much fun to play. It's something that I keep thinking recently that if you can nail the overall game feel of something, that is like the most important part of a game, man. Like, I keep coming back to Marvel Rivals because just shooting with a lot of characters feels great. It's something about the audio visual feedback, the impact of things. There's just some magical combination of factors that makes it so that pressing buttons does cool stuff and that feels good. And Wilds has that. You get this itch of like, I want to hear the chainsaw of my charge blade now, and you just can't help but load up the game, even if it's for no other reason than to just have fun going on a hunt. It's that simple. And Wilds has nailed that, in my opinion, so far, but it still feels like the foundation of a new generation of Monster Hunter, and one that didn't come as prepared as it should have. Overall, absolutely fantastic, but as I've said, given the performance issues that might not exist by the time you watch this video, but given those performance issues, plus that lack of monsters, the solution to both of those problems is wait. So keep that in mind. But as a huge Monster Hunter fan, I'm very disappointed by the performance stuff. And I can't lie that I do feel a little disappointed reaching Endgame here and going like, would have been nice to see some stuff here that isn't here in taking advantage of those systems. But what's at the core, what matters the most, that foundation on which to build on that front, Wilds is just firing on all cylinders, much like my PC trying to play Wilds at a stable frame rate, which is running at a temperature that should not be allowed. I've been Mug. Thank you so much for watching this different sort of video, just my ideas on a lot of what's going on. And I hope you had a good time. A special shout out to the patrons for supporting all of my nonsense. Stay tuned for more Wilds and video game content in general. There's a video that I've always wanted to make about Monster Hunter that hopefully I can now do. But I gotta get on that like immediately. It's been a blast. I'm having a blast with Monster Hunter Wilds. I'm very excited for the future of the game. Even if I have my grievances with it, it's still Monster Hunter at the end of the day. Like, it's that simple. And I think that they did a good job overall. If you want more in the world of video games, including some of that more Monster Hunter news, reviews, retrospectives, all sorts of stuff, just subscribe. Hit the subscribe button for more. I'm trying to beat GameSpot in subscribers, and we only need 5.4 million more. Go out there and enjoy some great video games. I'll see you again very soon.